Hi, Byron.
Hi, David.
This might be the most anticipated Blogging Heads episode ever. I can't think of any that has gotten so much promotional buzz going, at least in my office with 3 people.
It's a special all hubris Blogging Heads TV, and I want to first of all I want to congratulate you on your book.
We don't have fancy graphics here, so I'm holding up a copy of the book instead
We
of one of those.
can both look at the same
things.
time. Yes.
There you go. Okay, I'm sure yours is well thumbed. I'd like to, before we get into the meat of the book, which I am happy to do.
Yes.
I'd like to start with what I call unfinished business.
Unfinished business.
Yes. Regarding the 2 pieces that you wrote about the book,
Right.
as it was being birthed into this great world of ours.
Well, after excerpts of it had been published in Newsweek, and after your co-author Mike Isikoff had appeared on the Today Show, and you had been on Fox, and there was a fair amount of media.
I said as it was being birthed into this world. That counts as birthing and the book business. And one of the first pieces you wrote, which I have to say disappointed me, was you went to the Flax for Scooter Libby and Carl Rove, and they said,
some people call them spokesmen.
Well, I know, but I call them spinners and flax. Mm-hmm. And you can choose your own words and let the public decide which is a more accurate description. But you went to them, and you had a piece on the National Review website. We'll link to it. It's, that says Rove and Libby, quote, hubris authors never contacted us.
That's correct.
The CIA leak investigation book without the 2 key figures. Well, I got to tell you, we quote Rove's attorney within the book.
That is correct.
By name. We both went to Libby attorneys. Libby is not known to have given multiple interviews, but we did both try, asking whether they'd be willing to talk to the press. We sent an email to Dan Bartlett at the White House saying we had things we wanted to talk to him about regarding Carl Rove. And I remember going to a hearing at, probably you were there, one of the Libby hearings, and seeing Barbara Comstock, who you quote in this piece, who's a spokesperson, or
yes, I quoted both people by name in this, Barbara Comstock and Mark Correll from the Rove side.
And we told her we were working on this book, and at the same time, Mike Isikoff interviewed Mark Corello for the book.
Well, let me.
So I don't really quite understand.
Let me. I'll explain it.
I
don't want you to be confused here, and I think we should go through. I have the piece right here, by the way.
I do too.
And both spokespeople for Rove and for Libby told me this, and I sent you an email, by the way, and your response to me was that, quote, at one of the Libby hearings, as Ted Wells, one of the lawyers for Libby, was walking into the courtroom, I asked if he was talking to reporters, and he said no. And and I included that, by the way, in full in your response in the story. And when Mike responded later on, I included that in full. So what I did after I published with your response, when Mike called up, I talked to him and I added another comment in the corner, which is our group blog at nationalreview.com, and he reported that he told me, of course, that he had talked to, especially to Robert Luskin, Rove's lawyers, several times. And so I wrote that, Isikoff said this certainly qualifies as having interviewed the Rove camp for the new book. On the other hand, the Rove side believes there is a, quote, huge difference, in spokesman Mark Corallo's words, between talking to Isikoff about the case on a daily or weekly basis for Newsweek and for Hubris. Quote, there is clearly a difference between what appears in Newsweek and what would appear in a David Korn book, Corallo told me. And that was their position. I quoted them by name in this, and I quoted your full response. So I just don't think it's a big deal. And I find it amazing that given the important matters of state that this book is about, that you would want to start off with that.
Well, I do, because you're challenging our journalistic integrity. The headline says, Rove and Libby, Hubris authors, never contacted us. We quote Rove's attorney in the book. And I find it deliciously ironic that you ran a piece about not these people claiming they weren't contacted before you got Mike Isikoff's response. Yes, indeed.
Well, I got your response. I didn't know.
Let me finish. You indeed put up his response once you got it.
That's correct.
But you published a piece first before getting his response. And you don't note in the piece that we quote Rove's attorney within the book? I mean, that would count to me.
Well, wait a minute.
As contacting.
As I said, I included your entire response, and we'll say that here.
But it's just like wife beating. If two people accuse you of wife beating, and I say, Byron, were you beating your wife on this particular weekend? And you say, no, actually, I was out of the country that weekend. I wouldn't go ahead with a piece and say, well, they say this, and you say that.
Now, your other complaint was that I'd called you a conspiracy theorist, right?
Well, yeah, I just want to say that. I mean, it speaks to me a kind of looseness with the facts and a desire to serve one side in the debate here. And yes, we can move on to the next complaint, which is you called me a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
Please.
Now let me. Have you got that with you? Where I did call you that, by the way. I'm not.
Yes. Please do.
Well, I think that. First of all, one of the things I did.
I'll give the full quote. Korn, one of the leading conspiracy
theorists. Well, you are one of the leading conspiracy theorists. I do think so.
What's the conspiracy theory?
Well,
what's the conspiracy theory?
What I did was, before I wrote that, I went to davidkorn.com, which is your website, which just for convenience, listeners and viewers can also get to from bushlives.com, which is another one of your websites. And there's a story here, July 22nd, 2005, entitled Rose Scandal, a Conspiracy Charge for the White House. And then I also went to, again, davidkorn.com, also available at bushlives.com, April 11, 2006, The Cheney Conspiracy. And in both of these articles, you speculate about conspiracy. I'm walking into your trap.
You're walking into a trap.
Because you were just talking about some lawyer who suggested there could be a conspiracy, and you were not yourself putting the David Korn imprimatur on this, right?
Well, excuse me. You point to two headlines that use the word conspiracy.
That's right.
For our audience out there, will you please tell me what was the name of your last book?
My book was called, it's my only book, called The Vast Left-Wing Conspiracy, a title which I got, by the way, from the left, and you may remember articles. David, David, that's not going to fly. You remember an article in the summer of 2004 in the New York Times Sunday magazine that said wiring the vast left-wing conspiracy, and it was about new democratic efforts? Do you remember that? That's where I got the title.
I'm just asking you, if you referred in your title to a conspiracy, does that make you a conspiracy theorist?
Of course not.
Well, of course not. And so you're pointing out...
But I wasn't writing... I said specifically it wasn't a conspiracy, and you don't say that. What you do in these articles, Rose Scandal, a conspiracy charge for the White House, is pass on the possibility that... let me see. Let's go to the actual text. Nabbing Karl Rove on a conspiracy. To some, I don't know who that could be, that might sound rather appropriate. Listen, we're just speculating about what Fitzgerald may or may not have on this bunch. This bunch, I guess, being people in the White House.
You're calling me a conspiracy
and even if he's going all out to solve the case and bring home some solid indictments, he may not be able to pull together a solid enough case to take to court. So you don't say there is a theory, a conspiracy. You're theorizing about it.
No, I am theorizing that one possible course of legal action for him was a conspiracy charge, which often happens in all sorts of criminal prosecutions. Every time someone talks about a conspiracy charge, which is a legal term, you're smart enough to know that. And I was talking about this also in context of the APAC case, in which there is a charge of conspiracy as well.
This is the Larry Franklin case, you mean?
The APAC case. And so I was pointing out that, as in that case, Rove and others might be vulnerable to a conspiracy charge if the special prosecutor could prove that they got together and conspired to do this. So now, how does that make me a conspiracy theorist?
I think we should cut to the chase here. You do not believe that there was any conspiracy then to punish, smear, or in some other way discredit Joseph Wilson, a conspiracy based on the White House. You do not believe there was such a conspiracy, right?
No, what I've said, and it's actually
you don't,
in keeping.
Right?
No, I'll tell you what I said.
Okay.
I said that there was a campaign mounted by White House aides to undermine and discredit Joe Wilson.
And that's a good way to get into the substance of this story, because I agree with you that they wanted to discredit Joe Wilson, and my question to you is, what's wrong with that?
Were they working together to discredit Joe Wilson? Do you believe that? Did they have one conversation? Or were they all doing it individually?
No, they certainly had a conversation. They had more than one conversation.
So that's not a conspiracy. That's not getting together to do something, is it?
Well, you've been speculating on it. Wait a minute. When you say a conspiracy charge for the White House, you were talking about a criminal conspiracy. You were just lecturing me a moment ago about the fact that it's a legal term, and that's the way you were using it.
It is a legal term. That's
And
how I
that's
was
how
using
you were
it.
using it. So,
I was
yes,
using it as a
they
legal
talk
term.
together just as I might talk with another couple about where we're going to go out to dinner, but we're not conspiring to go out to dinner.
Yes, it is a legal term, but if a legal scholar talks about conspiracy charges, I'm not saying I am a legal scholar, you don't run out and say, that person is a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
It's a derogatory term used to diminish somebody's reporting. It was what you applied to me.
I did.
Do you stand by, do you still believe I'm a conspiracy theorist?
Well, as far as the CIA leak case is concerned, we're not talking about the Kennedy assassination or
No, I'm
9/11, but as far as the leak case is concerned, yeah, I stand by that.
Well, we just happen to agree that they were out to undermine and discredit Joe Wilson. You just said that.
They were, which I believe.
Okay,
I believe
so, then, so how am I? How am
because
I?
you suggest because your theory was that it was a criminal conspiracy.
Well, I didn't. I've said from the very beginning this might be a crime depending on whether they violated the Intelligence Identities Protection Act. That's what I've always said. I've never said that it was definitely a violation.
Right. So you're not a theorist because you've said that it might not be a conspiracy, right?
What? I've said it may or may not be a crime.
Okay.
Now, if you get together to commit a crime and it's proven, that's a criminal conspiracy.
That's right.
Now, you can conspire to do things that are not a crime. You can do that as well. But so anytime.
So what do you think they did here? Did they conspired to do things that weren't a crime?
I think they conspired to undermine Joe Wilson, as you just said that you believe they did.
They wanted to discredit him, yes.
They wanted to
discredit him. And I don't think there was anything wrong with that.
And that included the leak. And as they did that, they leaked classified information about his wife, and it was up to Patrick Fitzgerald to decide whether that met the threshold of the criminal statute.
And he decided that very early that it didn't he?
He decided at the end that it did not.
Right.
But so, I mean...
Well, you report in the book that he decided very early that it didn't meet the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, right?
Well, we don't give a date on when... We don't...
Yeah, but you leave the impression in the book that it was pretty early in it.
We don't know when that day happened. We do know that he's a very methodical prosecutor. He came in the very end of December of 2003, and he had to read into the case, and then he had to, bring people before the grand jury to make sure that they said what were in the FBI files. So it took some time. But at some point, he thought, and he kept digging, and he kept finding, he kept bringing people before, I am not a special prosecutor, but I would assume that you want to, before you come to any hard and fast conclusions, even those that would support your initial theories or ideas about the case, you look at all the documents you can get and talk to everyone you can so that you don't miss the person who comes in and talks about the one conversation that you didn't catch that turns everything on its head.
Right, but by the time of his news conference in October of 2005, he just ran away from the word covert like a scalded dog. He just didn't want to use that word at all. And
no, he said she was
people like you
classified.
stopped using the word covert all the time. I don't know why everybody stopped using the word covert. Maybe you could help me on that one.
Undercover? She was an undercover, clandestine, covert, secret, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so you don't run away from the word covert. He did, right?
He said that she was classified.
Yeah, and he wouldn't use the word covert.
Well, you can
He
go
was asked about it.
You can go nab an interview with him and ask him. He said she was classified.
Well,
there are the covert is used two ways in this whole case. Covert as a adjective, which is the way I first use it, means someone who's clandestine, who's secret, who's undercover. Now, there's also a legal definition of covert, which applies to the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, and it has definitions. Under those definitions, it only pertains to whether you're going to bring a case under that statute.
Right.
Under those definitions, you have to the government has to be taking steps to maintain your cover.
Right.
You have to have been overseas sometime in the last 5 years. So there's that covert. The legal, the statute definition, and then there's the general. I mean, I've called people covert CIA officers. I've been writing about this for over 20 years, and that didn't mean they had to fit the definition of the Intelligence Identities Protection Act.
Okay, well, listen, I have a bunch of, since you're the author of
this.
This new book, which we're talking about, Hubris, I have a number of questions, and the first one involves your talking with Joe Wilson. Was it 2 days, I guess, after the original Robert Novak story comes out?
No, it's pretty clear. You can go back and look at it again. It's that morning.
It was. Oops, I'm wrong already.
Yes.
So you talk with Wilson, and as you describe it in the book, there's a couple of things. He says he won't talk about his wife, right?
I pressed him. I said, "Does she work for the CIA?"
Yeah.
What the hell? What does she? What does she do? What does she know?
Right.
What is she known as?
And so,
and he says she works for an energy firm, or she's an energy analyst, however you put it. And I said, "Did she work at the CIA? Did she do this?" And he goes, "I'm not going to talk about my wife."
okay, and you reported after this conversation in which he didn't talk about his wife, you reported that, quote, a pair of top Bush officials told a reporter the name of a CIA operative who apparently has worked under what's known as non-official cover and who has had the dicey and difficult mission of tracking parties trying to buy or sell weapons of mass destruction or WMD material. And this is the information that you got from Wilson not talking about his wife, right?
I am so glad you asked
I knew you
that,
would be.
Because, can you please read the full quote?
I don't, well, you can...
Can you please read the full quote? That's only part of the sentence. Can you read the full quote?
I'm not reading from your article. I've actually pulled out that quote. I don't have it in front of me.
Well,
you must have
I noted in your piece about that, you didn't use the full
so
quote.
What are you saying? It could be that? Is that your
No,
cover?
let me say it. You said Korn wrote on July 16th, 2003.
Yes.
It's not important. People can look it up. That, quote, a pair of top officials told a reporter. Okay, so you're saying that Korn wrote that this thing happened. That is what you're saying.
That's right.
Well,
and you threw in the word apparently.
This. I use the word apparently.
All right, David. What is it now?
But this is why I object to your reporting and to what you did in the first story about Mark Crello and Barbara Comstock. The full paragraph reads: the sources for Novak's assertions about Wilson's wife appear to be two senior administration officials.
Yeah, Novak said that.
Okay.
That's good reporting.
No, it says, if so.
If so.
Meaning, if this is right, if Novak is reporting this correctly, and presumably these people are telling the truth, if that is the case, that would mean, I didn't say that would mean, I say if so, then a pair of top officials, Bush officials, told a reporter the name.
Well, yeah, but how did you know the knock part?
Well, this is,
You say that you inferred that it was a logical
Thompson,
deduction, right, from your conversation with Wilson?
Yes. You know why? It's really quite simple, and a bright fellow such as yourself should be able to understand this. And maybe, I don't know, because Victoria Tomsig made the same point in the Wall Street Journal, and other of your colleagues at the corner have done the same thing. It's very simple. There are two types of CIA officials undercover. Only two.
So from Wilson not talking about his wife, you were able to infer this.
Let me finish with my lecture here, because I think it's very clear.
Lecture is a good word.
No, yes, it is, because I think you need to study this. There are two types of cover. One is official cover. That means you tell people, you work at the CIA, but you tell people you work at a different part of the government.
Right.
Overseas, you would say you work at the American Embassy as a political officer, or you might be a Defense Department attaché. Doing so, you have an official diplomatic passport. Anything happens to you, you're covered by diplomatic immunity. Now, the other type of cover is called non-official cover.
Correct.
NOC is called a NOC. And if you have that type of job, you don't tell people you work at at any government agency, let alone the CIA. You tell them you're a business person, a tourist.
First of all, David, I think we should stipulate that the only people who are going to be watching this are people who probably are interested in the details of this case, so you can kind of skip some of this explication.
Well, just in case we get a wider audience for this, I feel compelled to lay this out, because you know what? You and others keep getting this wrong.
Actually, what you say brings me up to a question, if Plame was a knock.
Let me finish my point.
Okay.
So you have Novak reporting, based on two government officials, that she's a CIA operative.
So the word operative to you absolutely meant covert,
right? Let me finish. No, let me finish.
Okay.
That he's a CIA operative. Or to begin with, I have never met in my life, and I wrote a book about the CIA, and I've been writing about this for over 20 years. I've never met a non-secret CIA operative. Maybe you have, but I've never met a non-secret CIA operative. Anyway, he calls her a CIA operative. Then I learned that she goes around telling people that she's an energy analyst, not that she works for the Department of Defense or the State Department or USAID or anything else. So if you have those two facts, as I said, if those two facts are accurate, if she tells people she works for an energy firm and she's actually a CIA operative, then there is only one thing she can be, and that is someone working under non-official cover. I didn't have to have Joe Wilson or Jim Woolsey or I guess George Tenet at the
Right.
time, anyone at the CIA, tell me that. Which is why I put it as apparently.
Mm-hmm.
If these facts are true, that would mean not that they just blew the cover of any old CIA operative. They blew the cover of a nut.
That brings me up to a question. David, you have finished your lecture. It is over.
Okay, but
so it brings me to a question.
That?
You know, she was clearly a knock at one point, but I do have a question. If you're a knock, which means you're supposed to have no apparent connection, not just to the CIA, but to the U.S. government anyway, would it be okay if you were a knock to have your husband openly working on behalf of the CIA? Would that be okay?
Well, apparently the CIA didn't mind that,
Right.
because in 1999, another point that gets left out of here.
We know Wilson did this other thing. We know that.
Yeah, a lot of the stories. Why do they pick Joe Wilson in 2002 to go on this mission to Niger?
In part because his wife suggested it.
You know, he was an outright opponent of Bush and a critic of the war. Well, and he had no expertise. You know, why pick a guy like this?
Right.
Well, listen, Joe Wilson can defend himself, but the facts are there. In 1999, he took a trip to Niger, and he would actually reveal in the book for the first time that what he was looking for was information about A.Q. Khan's activity in Niger. The A.Q. Khan, the notorious, weapons proliferator out of Pakistan. So he had served his government.
So anyway, if you're a knock, it's okay if your husband works for the CIA openly, right?
Excuse me?
If you're a knock, it's okay if your husband work openly for the CIA.
Now let me finish here. You can go make fun of this if you like. But the issue here is she had non-official cover status. If you read the book, too, you would know that at the time of her outing, she was changing her status from non-official cover to official cover, which a lot of people have at the CIA. They still work at the CIA. They go there every day. They commute there. But they tell everybody else they work at the Department of State or some other place.
I mean, it would be hard to maintain non-official cover for a long period of time working at CIA headquarters, wouldn't it?
Probably, and because she came back and she got into a different path, she kept that cover. But the bottom line here is, whether she had non-official cover or official cover, she had cover.
All right, well, let me ask
you
another thing about her.
And by talking about her,
David, you've got to stop talking at some point, and let me ask you another couple of questions.
By talking about her, they blew her cover.
Now, let me ask you about, I'm interested, you report that Valerie Plame headed this thing called the Joint Task Force on Iraq, which is...
Byron, you got to read better. No, I said she was the
operations chief.
Within that
she was the operations chief.
There was a deputy chief, and there was a chief of the task force.
Okay.
So she's not running the task force itself.
But she was a high official in this task force, right? The operations chief.
She was the operations...
What does that mean? What does operations mean?
That means that the Joint Task Force on Iraq is a component of the counter-proliferation
Right, but what is the what does her job mean?
Which is part of the Director of Operations. This is the secret side of the CIA, not the analytical side. It mounts operations, espionage operations, covert actions, and all sorts of things. So this counter-proliferation division, working around the world, has about 300 people, I understand, in it, tries to do two things, primarily. Tries to gather secret intelligence on WMD activities, and wait a second, and it also mounts covert actions to try to thwart WMD proliferation.
So you report that before 2001, the search for information on Iraq was really ramped up in the Bush administration before 2001, and they create this joint task force.
Yes.
She becomes head of operations. And
Chief of operations. Yes.
Is that a big deal?
Well, I think that's probably a mid-level, maybe a senior mid-level. I think.
Well, you make it like it's an extremely important assignment, given obviously the importance of Iraq.
Listen, I think the people underneath her had terribly important assignments. I think the case officers who go out there and go around the world trying to penetrate, the WMD world. And
but we're talking about.
I think that's very important.
All right, so you write.
And I think the person who manages and oversees that and participates
in
those operations.
I'm just going to start talking. You write on page 300 that
go ahead.
That there was anger inside the CIA at the leak, and you said, quote, "It was unclear what actual damage, if any, had been caused by the leak." A couple of other sentences. Valerie Wilson was not a widely known officer. She was one of the thousands of mid-level employees at the agency. I asked Tenet if he knew who she was. A senior CIA official later recalled, and he said no. Right? So now, tell me about this. She had the paperwork was underway for her not to be a knot anymore, right?
Correct.
Okay. How far along was that?
I don't know. I don't know if that's a process that takes 3 months or 3 weeks. It was in transition.
And she had, now, she comes back to the United States in 98, right? And she marries Joseph Wilson in April 97. She marries Wilson in April 98.
Right.
And it says less than 2 years later she gave birth to twins. So I'm assuming in very early 2000. Is that about right?
I think that's right.
Okay. And after that she suffers from postpartum depression. And her maternity leave, she returns to the CIA CPD, Counterproliferation Division, in the spring of 2001, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so her maternity leave, is it fair to say, is roughly a year?
I don't know what was maternity leave. I don't know what was postpartum. If she had sick leave, I don't know.
But anyway, she was away from the job, you think? Would it be fair to say?
Well, for part of that time, she was away from the job.
Okay, so she comes back in the spring of 2001, and that's when she's given a choice to work on North Korea or Iraq, and she...
Yeah, she goes back to the CPD where she had been before.
Okay, so from 2002 until, 2001 until the Novak column in July 2003, she's doing that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, on this Wilson...
And your point is?
I was just asking.
Well,
because I wondered how long...
We can recite the book here. That'd be fine by me. I mean, that's what she was doing.
Right.
What I don't quite understand...
Well, see, but she was in transition, right?
At the time of the outing, yes. But what I don't understand... let me ask you this.
Well...
Do you think it was not a bad thing for her to be outed?
No, but you have to look. Given what's going on in this case, it's reasonable to try to determine her status.
Well, we have determined her status. We've determined what she did, and we determined that she was still, she was in transition at that point in time, and we determined what she's been doing for the past few years. Now, I'd like you to tell me: do you believe that it was a good thing, appropriate? It was an act of probity for government officials trying to undermine her husband.
Well, first of all...
wait a second. To leak information to reporters about her status at the CIA.
Well, first of all, I don't think Fitzgerald... Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think Fitzgerald has alleged that anybody who was involved in this knew, any of the people who were accused of leaking this, knew that she was covert, right? Fitzgerald has not alleged that, has he?
He has said it was classified information. He said that they...
No, but that doesn't matter. But they've alleged that nobody knew that.
I find it very interesting here that you can't give me a simple answer, regardless of whether they knew or not. I don't say they knew.
Right.
I just say, do you think that was...
Okay, so this conspiracy was to do something that they didn't even know they were doing, right?
What?
They were conspiring to do something that they didn't even know they were doing, right?
On June 12th, what did Dick Cheney tell Scooter Libby?
I don't know. What did he tell her?
Well, if you read the book, you might know that too, Brian.
Come on, David.
He told her that she worked in the Counterproliferation Division.
Right.
So now, most people familiar with the CIA, as we know Dick Cheney and Scooter Libby were intimately familiar with, would have reason to suspect or wonder, or at least think about the fact that a CPD officer could well be
why wouldn't
covert, classified,
Fitzgerald have alleged that somebody knew that she was... Well, did Armitage know she was covert?
I don't know what he knew. I don't know.
Did he know where she worked? Wait a minute. Did Armitage know where she worked?
Well, Novak says that he knew that she worked. He called it the Counterproliferation Section.
So, in other words, he should have known too, right?
Well, maybe he should have. Yes. I don't.
So Armitage is as big a villain in this as anybody else, right?
No, I think he did. I think what he did was as wrong as what anybody else did.
Right.
You have yet to tell me whether you think that what he did or what...
Well, it's mitigated by the fact that they didn't know that she was covert and that she was actually, seems to me, in transition.
Right now, regardless of whether it was criminal or not, do you think what they did was wrong?
Well, in retrospect, they shouldn't have done it, but they didn't know.
Okay, so then it was wrong.
But they...
Okay, so Karl Rove leaked classified information. Now, you're saying...
Now, wait a minute. The leak of classified information involved Novak calling Rove. And Rove saying, I've heard that too. Or if you believe Novak's version, you know that too.
Look at the Matt Cooper. This is another point that people...
Matt Cooper calls up to talk about welfare reform, and at the end of it, he asked about this, and Rove, knowing, by the way, that the CIA is going to come out with a statement, Rove says, I wouldn't get too far out on this Wilson thing. And he says his wife was involved in sending him on this trip.
There you go.
There is the crime, right?
And
that is the crime, right?
I didn't say it was a crime.
Okay, there
I
is
said
the
it's wrong.
wrongdoing.
That is wrong.
Yes.
It is wrong for someone to say someone works at the CIA,
Right.
who's a CIA operative. It certainly shows a certain recklessness.
Well, we don't know
You
that he called
care-
him a CIA operative. As a matter of
Well,
fact,
we do know
Cooper
that-
certainly
we do
didn't
know-
use that phrase, did he?
What?
Cooper didn't use the phrase operative, did he?
No, we do know. Well, I'm saying.
But so
for
Rove,
a
we
high-
don't know that Rove said she was a CIA operative,
you know,
do we?
No, I didn't say he said
Okay.
that. He said he was CIA operative.
Okay.
If I said that, that's not the case. But he did tell Matt Cooper that Wilson's wife worked at the CIA.
Right.
Okay, now that was wrong, right? He shouldn't have done that.
Well,
right?
he didn't know that it was wrong.
No. But if you're a high government official, don't you have? In fact, you do. You have an obligation. You sign a piece of paper not to release classified information. Now, that would indicate to me that when you talk to someone about a CIA matter, you might pause for a second to consider whether indeed this is classified or not. And if you don't do that, you're being a wee bit reckless.
A wee bit reckless.
And with Scooter Libby...
So that could have been a title for your book, A Wee Bit Reckless,
You know,
couldn't it?
I can just imagine what you guys would have said if someone in the Clinton White House had done this.
Of course, the Clinton White House leaked.
When the White House
Look, they leaked
turn
classified
it this way.
information. Let me tell you something.
Remember in
Remember in 1998 when the cruise missile attacks went against Afghanistan and Sudan, there was a lot of controversy with the attack in Khartoum, in which it was, I believe, a guard was killed, just one person. But there was a lot of controversy saying, well, did this plant really make the precursors for chemical weapons? And the administration strongly believed it did, and there were a lot of people, including Republicans, criticizing it. And the White House, amazingly enough, began to leak classified information about what kind of chemical was there. Well, I know you were outraged by this, and I remember the book you wrote about it. But they began to release information about the classified information, about what kind of chemicals were there.
Right, and so
that was wrong, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was wrong.
And you were outraged, right?
It was wrong.
You were outraged.
They should have, and Congress would have been right to investigate if they wanted to.
And you would have favored an investigation, calling people up before the grand jury, making them sign waivers, putting them in jail. You would have favored all that, right?
The White House itself said that the leak was wrong, and anybody involved in it, that was their word additionally, anybody involved in the leak wouldn't work at the White House.
I don't think they should have said that, by the way.
Okay, so was that a lie or
well, I think it was a misjudgment. They shouldn't have said that.
So they didn't keep their promise then. They weren't serious when they said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just BS, just bullshit from the White House.
Well, David, you can post that on bushlies.com. Now, a question
is
about
that true?
when you talk with Wilson, the morning of the Novak column, you talk with Wilson, and you ask him, according to the book, hey, have you ever heard of this law called the Intelligence Identities Protection Act?
Yeah.
Wilson says no, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Never.
And so you say, well, there could be a violation of this, right?
I said this could conceivably be a violation
so you're
of that law.
kind of like a lawyer, kind of like an ambulance chaser calling up. Have you been injured in an auto accident? You may have a claim here, right?
Excuse me.
So he had never heard of this before.
Excuse me. I was a journalist following a story.
Right.
I thought that might be an evidence.
So you write a story, and I know you get upset about this, but you write a story which was the first story to publicly say she was an undercover CIA
I don't say she was
officer,
that.
right?
I said that if Novak is
right. You're right. You say she apparently was. You're the first person to say that she apparently was, and this was apparently a criminal case, right?
I don't understand why I have to keep repeating this. Because, I understand I understand the agenda here.
Well, David,
I understand the agenda here because it comes at me all the time from you and your colleagues. It's very simple here. I said it might be a crime, and I said if what Novak reported is true, then she apparently is a non-official covert CIA operative. That's all.
Now, are you prepared to say now that it wasn't a crime, by the way?
Yeah. If a prosecutor investigates something and he doesn't find evidence that meets that meets the standard, it's not a crime. Okay, but I'm still saying it's wrong.
So you're okay on that?
And I was certainly right at the time to say it might have been a crime because look, the Office of Security at the CIA, they agreed. The Criminal Department of the Justice Department, they agreed. The FBI agreed. Patrick Fitzgerald has spent 2 years investigating this. So believe me, I wish, as Bob Novak said, that I have the power to gin up something like this. But I really have to believe that most people involved in those positions would rather not have an investigation of this sort. And I remember Ed Gillespie.
Now, on page 256, you write about how the administration's case for war is falling apart, and say that unraveling would result in an orchestrated high-level effort to discredit Wilson and culminate in a leak that would be seized on by administration critics as prime evidence of White House desperation and deviousness, even though it was caused partly by an improbable series of accidents and misunderstandings. Now, you would have to count yourself among those administration critics who seized on this as prime evidence of White House desperation and deviousness.
But as the book points out, and we can talk about this. What does Adam Levine, top White House communications aide, what does he say about Scooter Libby in the context of the attack on Joe Wilson? You read the book. Do you remember what he says? He says Scooter Libby is going nuts about this. What does Carl Rove calls Chris Matthews? This is in the book. After he calls him, Matthews hangs up the phone and turns to a colleague. What does Matthews say? Well,
you tell me. You wrote the book.
If you want to debate me here, Byron, it's pretty elemental. He says to his colleagues, that was Carl Rove. He just said, the Wilsons are screwing us, we're going to screw them back. Now, you put that together, and guess what? You do have a campaign, a political campaign to undermine Joe Wilson. You have Patrick Fitzgerald saying that as well. You have these guys inside the White House saying that as well. And while they were running this campaign, they were leaking, they were putting out talking points.
Right, so in other words, you were right to seize on this as prime evidence of White House desperation and deviousness, but you were mistaken to the degree that it was caused partly by an improbable series of accidents and misunderstandings. Would that be a fair way to say it?
There are two things going on here.
I mean, I'm reading from the book.
It's not that difficult. There are two things going on. Scooter Libby and Carl Rove, according to the documentary evidence already, according to the new eyewitness accounts we bring to bear in the book, were out to undermine Joe Wilson. In the course of doing that,
of course they were. David, you don't have to reveal that they were out to undermine Joe Wilson. We knew that.
They got frantic. They were going nuts, in the word of one White House person working with them. In the course of doing that, Scooter Libby talked to two reporters about Valerie Wilson, or Joe Wilson's wife, working at the CIA. Carl Rove talked to two reporters.
You're right. Now, wait a minute. Now, Scooter Libby, everybody reached out, right? So Libby reached out to the reporters to tell them this, and Rove reached out to the reporters to tell them this.
I didn't say anybody.
The conspiracy, these guys are so good that they managed to get reporters to call them and ask them about this. I mean, it's incredible how good they are.
You don't want to deal with the facts. I never said they reached out. Scooter Libby actually... When Judy Miller came...
Yeah, but the fact that they didn't reach out suggests that they weren't going nuts about it, David. Come on, you just have Adam Levine saying that Scooter was going nuts.
When Judy Miller meets Scooter Libby, according to her own notes, he's obsessed with this and keeps talking about Joe Wilson and talks about his wife. So you can dismiss that too.
But the thing is, the point is, if they're also obsessed about this, they're not calling reporters, because you show in your book, by the way, that the famous 1 by 2 by 6 theory was a complete mistake. And it was a mess.
I never said they called reporters.
And the original leak happens to somebody who's not in the conspiracy. I mean, the thing about your book, and there are many good things about this book, but you could, with all the information that you and Mike gathered, you could have published a book called All Screwed Up about how stupid this entire matter was and did not merit investigation. I don't think that you could go there given your previous reporting, so you come up with this two-track idea, which is there was a good leak, Armitage, and a bad leak, Rove.
Again, you got to, if you're not going to characterize this act...
You're not, listen, you are nowhere near as tough on Armitage as you are on Rove and Libby. There's no doubt about it. Even though Armitage, according to your reporting, not only...
It's pretty clear in the book. It's pretty clear in the book, as we show, that Rove and Libby were out to undermine Wilson's credibility. It's my
But what's wrong with that? Wilson had mounted what you called a one-man publicity blitz against the White House when he goes to the New York Times to meet the press. And the White House decides to undermine the guy. What's the problem?
You agreed earlier that they were out to undermine him. We have Dick Cheney. We have Dick Cheney going to the CIA to get information on him and sharing that information to Scooter Libby.
Cheney wanted to know how the trip happened. You would too. I wanted to know how it happened. Everybody wanted to know. When Wilson came out blazing with what you call his one-man publicity blitz, everybody wanted to know, well, hell, why would they send this guy to Africa?
And it just shows that you're just there flacking away like everybody else. An honest way to deal with this.
David,
no.
Look, everybody who disagrees with you is not a
flack. The honest way of dealing with this, if you work for the White House, is let's find out all the facts before we say anything. Let's not go into political campaign mode.
You're right. It would have been terrible. Now, on the facts part, there was a problem with what Joe Wilson said.
Let me finish here.
When you went on Meet the Press and later. Wilson actually misspoke about these Italian documents, didn't he? He said he debunked them, but he actually couldn't have. Is that right?
I'm making a point here. If you don't want to hear it, we can stop right now. It's up to you.
Well, it's the threaten to stop. If you'll make your point, we'll give you a minute to make the point. Can you make it in a minute?
You've been going on here a long time yourself. The point is there was an honest way to do this. If something's out there in the news and you're working in the government, you can ask questions. And you can determine what really happened and who the players really were and whether this involves classified information, since it does involve the Counter-Proliferation Division. And listen,
so one of the questions would be, who sent this guy?
That was about 10 seconds before you start interrupting. Okay? And if you're the Vice President of the United States and the Chief of Staff to the Vice President of the United States, and you're entrusted with the deepest and darkest secrets of these United States, and you're calling the CIA to find things out, and then you turn around without determining what you may actually be doing, but because you're in campaign mode and you got to try to discredit someone who you feel is unfairly criticizing you, whether you get a lot of criticism, then you're entitled to be reckless with secrets of the United States government. I mean, it's without doubt now that she was undercover. It's without doubt that she had worked on classified operations for the U.S. government for years on, ironically, the top priority of the Bush administration. Her job had been to find the evidence to back up the president's justification for the war in Iraq. And I find it kind of... And
so the title of the book is A Wee Bit Reckless.
Wants to come to terms with that. You blithely come up with excuses. Oh, Joe Wilson was unfairly attacking the White House. So that gives them the right to be wrong themselves. I hold Joe Wilson's a private citizen. He's entitled to lie, to cheat, to be right, to be wrong, to make mistakes. The people who work on our tax dollars, who are supposed to be protecting the right secrets and the good secrets and even the bad secrets.
It's not that simple. There was a reason Wilson went, and his wife was part of that reason.
Again, if you read the book, you'll find out that she didn't send him on the trip.
Yeah, you say there was this mistake, and this guy Roan he had put the word apparently in, and then apparently got out. And then
you can diminish this, but the person who wrote the notes on which that is based says that his notes were misinterpreted. Now, that's called reporting, Byron. It's called reporting. It's getting a named source to say that he wrote the words apparently convened regarding a meeting that might have involved
Right, so she played no role in the choice of him for this mission, right?
She was asked by a
No. She played no role in it, right? Every time I say that she suggested it, someone like you says, well, she didn't authorize it. Of course she didn't authorize it, but did she suggest it? Okay. So what role did she play?
I really wish you read the book, because this is very...
What role did she play,
David? Was a CPD officer came and said, we'd like to send your husband on another trip again, like we did 2 years ago, because he does know Niger, he does know the uranium industry there, so we consider him qualified, and obviously he didn't bollocks up the last job. So...
And then later she writes the memo saying how he's got good contacts
and all that, can you go and ask him to come and talk about this? And
later she writes the memo about how he's got good contacts and all that.
And he says to her, can you send an email to the deputy chief of our division saying that, that I've asked you to call him in, and this is why. And so she says, asking my husband to come in, he has good contacts. Then there's a whole issue of a meeting that she did or did not attend. The guy, a fellow from the State Department, his name is Doug Rohn, he's in the book. I actually found him and got him to talk on the record, which is what reporters do. And he said in his notes, which were released under FOIA, said that Valerie.
And he said he mistakenly told the Senate
meeting.
Intelligence Committee about
this meeting, another State Department memo that was written request to Libby's request, written response to Libby's request, said that she convened the meeting, dropped the word apparently. I asked him about this. He said that he got to the meeting late. She wasn't there. It was his impression, which was just an impression he thought was probably a misimpression, that she had convened the meeting that led to.
So Libby got bad information from the CIA,
not from the CIA. He got bad information from the State Department. Yeah, if I wonder if you really read the book, because we go into this in great detail describing how this memo, which is why that quote that you read earlier from the beginning of the book said that it was partly because of a series of mishaps and misunderstandings. This is the mishap and misunderstanding.
Well, there were plenty of mishaps and misunderstandings. The 1 by 2 by 6 thing,
which we talked about, and we say that story in the Washington Post was wrong. We say this book calls the facts the way they see it. Unfortunately, I don't see everyone on your side arguing this case. I see a lot of talk about the Armitage leak, and not anyone mentioning about the Rove leak.
The reason there was so much talk about the Armitage leak was that there had been tons and tons and tons of talk about the Rove and the Libby leaks, including after Libby's indictment, which you may remember. So, amazingly enough, the book did make news on the Armitage thing, and amazingly enough, people talked about what was in the news at that point.
I see whole pieces written about this that don't really mention Carl Rove's, leaking to Matt Cooper.
You're right.
And whether,
so listen, I have this question about talking about trying to get at go after Wilson.
This is the bottom line, and I always take a step back. This book that I co-wrote with Mike Isikoff of Newsweek, it's called Hubris. You can go to the link next door. There are pictures here. Is a narrative behind-the-scenes account of the sales campaign and all the fights that went on in the CIA, the State Department, the Pentagon, the White House, and Congress in the run-up to the war, having nothing to do with the leak at all. And how, again and again and again, people had the right call on intelligence matters on Bush's case for war, and that the bureaucracy and the White House itself had no interest whatsoever in sussing this out and performing due diligence on the intelligence that they then represented to the public as being, as Bush said in his last speech before the war, no doubt. Okay, in the course of doing this, Mike and I didn't know where information we'd get when we started. We reported. We dug down deep. We found sources, and we discovered the confirming information that Armitage was the leaker. We found out more information about the campaign that Rove and Libby waged to
have reporters call them so they could put out the information.
We found out more information about the whole to do about whether she sent them and what Joe Wilson did previously and why he was actually quite qualified to be given that job, whether by his wife or not.
Now, on this Wilson thing, didn't he early on in this talk about? Didn't he early on talk about these Italian documents?
And now what I see is people defending the administration doing exactly what the administration did: cherry picking, finding facts and factoids that fit their political agendas. And saying the other, and not paying attention to the other stuff, not paying attention to the other parts of the book or the other parts of the leak story.
That's right. Well, look, we're talking about the leak case here, okay? So we're not going to pay attention to other parts of the book right now, and I would urge all of our viewers to go buy it. Now, on the Wilson issue, he did talk about this Italian document stuff, didn't he? He said he had debunked them. Is that right?
On his New York Times op-ed piece, he said he hadn't seen the documents.
But he later said he was on Meet the Press, and then he did some other stuff. And actually, in his talk with Nicholas Kristof, when he was still the unnamed source,
and in the book,
he said he debunked them, right?
He said he debunked the documents at the time. At the time that he
and then he later had to say he misspoke.
At the time he went on the trip, they didn't have the documents in hand. Although.
And then when he talked, he talked to Walter Pincus several months after talking to Kristof.
No, it was a couple weeks.
And he misspoke again.
It was a couple.
And he said he had debunked them.
It was about 3 weeks later.
Okay, maybe 3 weeks later, and then he misspoke again in the same way, right?
But the thing here is, again, we show this in the book.
So what I'm saying is that Wilson was putting out bad information, and the White House, amazingly enough, I'm sure it'll stun anybody involved in politics, wanted to hit back.
Oh, and that, again, this gets to the bottom line.
Right? I mean, first of all, it was reasonable for the White House to want to hit it back, wasn't it?
Hit back?
Yeah.
I would prefer if the White House didn't hit any policy critics and would engage in a
You're right.
board debate.
And that would be a very sweet and peaceful world, but I don't think it happened in this administration or the Clinton administration or any administration before that.
If you want to say that Karl Rove's way of looking at the world from the White House as a political campaign is the model here, go ahead. I didn't like the political decision makers making policy issues in the Clinton White House. I don't like them doing it here. I expect more of my government, regardless of partisan.
Well, you're more idealistic than I am on that.
If you want to excuse Karl Rove and Scooter Libby doing this because they're being attacked, you can do that. You're fine. You take that stand. That's a highly principled stand for a journalist.
Before you say dumb things like that, I believe that, first of all, National Review when the Libby indictment came out, was very respectful of the indictment. And if you notice, a number of publications have called for Bush to pardon Libby, and National Review has not been one of them. So, I would temper my comments on how much we've been defending these people.
Well, I'm talking about what you're defending now, what you just defended. You said it wasn't natural for them to do what they did.
No, it was natural for them to hit back, absolutely.
Excuse me.
Look, this was a series. Look, this whole story was a series of screw-ups because they ended up attacking. They attacked their attacker, and they ended up using information, basically Plame's identity, that they should not have released for reasons that they didn't know at the time. This was a major screw-up, and it's one of the reasons why it was never even close that they would be charged with any of the underlying crimes, because the Intelligence Identities Protection Act did not even get close to applying, and the Espionage Act, as you report, it would have been a mangling of the act and a terrible precedent to charge under that. So they got Libby for perjury and obstruction. Nobody else was charged with anything.
Right.
This whole thing was a huge screw-up.
Let me ask you a question here. This is probably the last question, because we've gone on longer than most blogging hits TV shows.
How long are we going, by the way?
How long are we going? We're finishing after this, I hope. And that is this question. Dick Armitage, whatever you may think of him, he came forward, he's confessed what he's done, he's given at least his explanation,
right.
He's apologized.
Well, first of all, Armitage, if what you report is correct, he originally tells the Justice Department, but he doesn't tell them about Woodward. And it's not until after Libby is indicted and Woodward gets in touch with him that he tells them, even though you report that he was aggressively investigated by Fitzgerald, and we've later found out from the AP that Armitage's schedule said June 13th, 1 hour with Bob Woodward.
You didn't hear my question correctly. I talked about, I meant what he'd said last week, the other week.
Well, what he said last week, but he hasn't, he certainly hasn't dealt with everything that he did.
Yeah, this is the point. That he came forward, he at least apologized. He said he let down the president, he apologized to the Wilsons, and he confessed what he did. He gave his explanation, whatever it was.
Why didn't he do that when he was in government, by the way?
Excuse me. Why has
it's harder for people. Well, look, Libby's not going to say anything at all now because he's under indictment and it's going to go to trial. Okay, so can we put Libby off to the side?
This is my question. Why hasn't Karl Rove done the same? Why won't the White House explain what happened?
Well, first of all, Rove, I don't know why they do it. I'm not privy to their decision.
Should Rove come out and apologize as Armitage did? You said it was a screw-up, he made a mistake. Should Rove apologize?
You know, I don't know. Because the thing is that the crimes involved, or the wrongdoing involved, was one, saying to Novak, yeah, I've heard that too, and then two, saying to Cooper, you know, stay away from this Wilson thing, you know, his wife sent him. And that is you know, those are very small things in my view. And especially given the fact that he didn't know that her status was classified, whether she was covert or not.
How we know. We don't know how he knew that she worked at the CIA. We have a source in our book says that Libby told him, but we don't know that for sure. He could certainly come out and explain that if he wanted to. But he hasn't.
You could.
He hasn't. The White House, if it was a small little thing and just a little slip,
I believe this is all of it, despite the fact that you chose to write about a third of your book about it. All of this is a very minor affair.
He was as quiet about this as Richard Armitage now, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So everyone's yelling, why didn't Richard Armitage say what he knew? Well, why didn't Karl Rove say what he knew?
Because
or go to Libby.
Well, first of all, it came out that Rove was involved. And, right? You remember that? I mean, Mike Isikoff reported the email from Time magazine.
Rove wouldn't acknowledge that, and the White House refused to comment on it. They refused to say anything about it.
Well, that's what they always do with a criminal investigation. Look, the fact that this was a criminal investigation means the White House is not going to talk about it. You should go back and look at other criminal investigations in the past and see what White Houses have said about it.
Okay, the investigation's over.
No, it's not over. Do you know that it's over?
Karl Rove got a letter saying
has Fitzgerald closed up shop?
Karl Rove got the letter saying that he is no longer in investigation the way that Armitage did.
By the way, I need to clarify. Did he actually get a letter? I know they got that phone call from from Fitzgerald to Luskin.
Well, I think Luskin says he
got a letter.
I
know Armitage has said.
But Luskin says that he was
Right.
notified by Fitzgerald.
All right, so as far as you know, this investigation is over now.
Involving Carver, yeah,
Right.
involving Carver. And as far as I know from our reporting, there is no active investigative work. But while there's a trial, it's not unusual. While there's a trial underway, you don't close down your shop.
Well, what if Rove
in case the trial
waited
produces
until he
anything.
left government, like Armitage did, and talked about it then? Would that be all right?
Okay, I see that. Well, sure. Then we can just sort of yell at him for waiting so long, the way conservatives have yelled at Armitage for waiting so long.
The
But if
reason
he did nothing
conservatives
wrong,
yelled
as
at
you say,
Armitage
there's no
was
reason to
because
wait.
nobody
There's
outside of a
reason to
very
wait.
small group knew this. So he
No one-
sat
no
by
one knew what-
publicly while Rove and
No one
Libby
knew what
were
Rove
just,
did.
crucified.
Excuse me, no one knew what Rove did until Mike Isikoff had the Matt Cooper email.
Which was,
He
now
was-
when was that?
and actually
that was,
July
right.
2005. So that's almost 2 years. Almost
Yeah.
2 years. He didn't say anything. It was just a little slip, and he didn't want to say anything. Well, I think we've covered this enough, and since there were a couple key points I had to inform you about, I hope you get a chance to read the rest of
That's
the book.
right. The amazing thing is
Okay.
you find that people still don't fully agree with you, and perhaps the reason is not that they fail to see the shining logic and irrefutable facts of your viewpoint, but that this case is a complex
know the
case
facts.
that people view differently.
Well, just know the facts. So if you're going to talk about what happened afterwards, you know
Right.
what Adam Levine says, or what Carl Rove said to Chris Matthews. So you can just you can still diminish this and dismiss it, and I understand why you want to do that. But just please, I mean, there were a few things I had to explain.
And
here
David, you're
that
a
I thought
fine
if you
teacher, I
just read the
should
book,
say
you
that.
would've
You're an
gotten it.
excellent teacher.
Okay. Well, on that happy note, we're always looking.
Okay, so we need to
positive,
click this
for the positive
thing to
people.
shut it off, right?
We're going to say goodbye. We're going to say goodbye, and I guess we're going to say goodbye. When we say
Okay,
goodbye,
we're going to go 1,
So,
2,
Byron?
3, goodbye.
Goodbye.